Hey everyone. I wanted to share a little bit about hummingbirds. Hummingbirds are one of my favorite birds to try to photograph, but they are so hard. They can be really, really difficult. So what I wanted to do here was put together a little video on some tips. So as you can see, this was at a botanical gardens and it was a bench that was dedicated to somebody. And I saw that this little guy, my husband actually called me over and said that this hummingbird sat down, and you can see the first one that I did was completely out of focus. And then I went through, let me get it on him, and I started to adjust my camera settings and try to, inch in closer. And you can see that the little pollen all over his little face. It's so funny. It's like his forehead is covered in pollen. And, I missed some because he kind of shifted around a little bit. But I did get some where it was really clear. Now, obviously, that's pretty easy because I could just put my focus point on him. He's only about 2 inches long. And even at, what was I shooting at here? f1.8. It was fine. Now I was at 2,000th of a second. One thing about these little guys is if you're shooting flowers or something that isn't moving, when you go to photograph one of these guys, you have to get your shutter speed up at least 2,000, preferably 1/4,000th or maybe 1/8,000th if your camera does it, and then crank up your ISO because it is impossible to lock them down with their wings frozen unless you have a super fast shutter speed. And even at 1/8,000th of a second, there's still going to be motion blur because they are so fast. So I went through and I was, let's see, let me go back here. Here's another one that I did. And I just wanted to show you some of the misses. So yeah. Okay. So this one's, they're not even in this picture. Let me close out of that. And the hummingbird was actually here. You can see his little butt flying away completely. I mean, there's like a couple little feathers that are in focus. He was running like just all over the place. And there I snapped and he was out of the frame. And this is one that was kind of in focus. And it's hard when you're working super quickly to even, it's hard to even know if you're getting anything in focus at all. I had my camera set to 1.8 as the aperture, and that's very wide open. It's a 135, and I was at 1/3200th of a second. So that was allowing me to get the majority of his little body in focus, which is good. But even so, the wings are completely blurry. I was using the wide type of focus tracking. I wouldn't recommend a single focus point with hummingbirds. If you have any kind of motion tracking, so for instance, whatever you would use in your camera if you were tracking somebody running or an animal running, that would be what I would put it on. So continuous autofocus, so it's continuously focusing, and then something that is meant for tracking motion. The other big tip is to try to isolate the motion as much as you can with the bokeh. So I have it at 1.8 for a reason. If you look over here, this is mostly out of focus. So when I'm tracking it, the tracking might jump up to here if the flowers are bobbing in the wind, but it tends to want to go to whatever is moving fastest, and that would be this little one. So the good focus isn't really because I'm so awesome at all. It was because the way that I was sitting or crouching, if you will, the thing that was most in focus was going to be whatever was in the focal plane of focus, which is all of this. And then the rest was blur. And therefore, as long as I could keep it latched onto this general area, it would either bounce up here or bounce down here or bounce onto him. And so I had it rattling off at like, what would it be? I don't have it at high, like 24 frames a second. I usually have it on Sony cameras, there's like a low and a mid and a high. And high is 24 frames a second on some cameras. And then mid is like 16 or something like that. I can't remember, 12 to 16. And then low is like 5. So it's like clunk, 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 clunk. And so I had it kind of click, 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 click. And it's enough to get it to hopefully grab on to something. And then I edited it like this. And I just sort of enhanced the bokeh and everything there. But obviously I had a lot of misses. So it flew out from between these two flowers and up, and the flowers stayed in focus. And you can see how I messed most of those up. See, the majority, the only thing that's in focus here is the flower and his little beak, I guess, if you will. Let's see, is there anything there? Little feathers on the back. And so composition wise, I'm looking for one that tells the best story. And I like how this one has the wings spread and you see the feathers and maybe the wind rustling the feathers. However, the face is covered and it doesn't tell the best story. Now I liked this one a lot. Let me see if anything's in focus. So this one had his little breast was in focus and then possibly some back tail feathers, but his face was out of focus. And like the back wing was in focus. It's just kind of a weird focal plane. It kind of went that way. I liked the story here. I wished I had been 2 feet to the right because then he would have been straight on. But yeah, man, I love it so much. These are echinops, by the way. They're little blue balls they're in the same family as echinacea, I believe, and they're just so pretty. Anyway, side whale. I'm just, going on different tangents. But anyway, I like that one a lot. And then there was a time here when this little guy was getting a drink in this little fountain, and I missed the focus. It kept going to the rocks. They're so tiny that if you're using autofocus that's trying to pick whatever you want, it's going to miss a lot with a tiny, tiny little bird like this. In truth, probably if you could use manual focus, like if you had the knowledge that it would sit there for 30 seconds or more, dialing in the focus in that one spot would be good. But this was a hard one because he was rolling around. I mean, it looks like he's a little dead there, but he was literally rolling in the water, trying to clean off his little body. There, his little beak is in focus. Oh, that one's clear. There's a little water droplet on there. I might edit that one later. And because this is the A7R4, which has a huge megapixel count, this is 9504 by 6336, I could probably crop into this square here and get it. But I really like the moss and the stuff, but there he's all wet. So if you can catch a hummingbird when they're sitting, that's good. So let's talk about setting up your hummingbird area for maybe next year, since winter is upon us. Unless you're in the south and you're in a place where hummingbirds are actually headed to overwinter, then you're lucky. So what can you do? Number one, have things that are photogenic in your yard. This is obviously a really expensive water feature at a botanical gardens, but if you can have some kind of a fresh fountain that has clean water, that is one of the best ways to attract birds. Literally one of the best ways, and highly recommended by the ornithologists who work with birds, because fresh running water is going to be something that all birds need, and it also it's less of a predator draw. So if you have bird feeders and there are a lot of birds around the feeder, that is going to draw potential predators a lot more than water would, because it's more random. All birds need water, and therefore the feeders are going to draw a lot of birds at one time, and they're going to frequent it a lot. If you have multiple water features in your yard, that helps a lot. So what do I like to do? I like to have rocks that have depressions in them, and I'm going to pause this and see if I can't find a picture of what I'm talking about here. Let me just pause this. Okay, so looking here on the screen, this is what I'm talking about. This one here is, what is it? Basalt. It's like a special rock that has depressions in it, but this is what I look for. Because you can come out here with the hose and just shoot it at it, and it will fill with water, and you can photograph a bird on any of these ledges, and it looks amazing. It looks natural. It doesn't look like it's an actual bird bath. Things like this are better ish than a normal bird bath that looks like that, which obviously looks like, a man-made thing. But my ideal thing is something like this, but just do make sure that they're not super deep. Like this one has a really deep reservoir. You're going to have to put a bunch of rocks in here in order to keep the birds happy, because they're going to feel like they could drown, especially little birds like hummingbirds. They only want water that's about 1/4 inch deep. They don't want water that's really deep, and they also don't want water that's stagnant. So if you would take something like this and you would pile rocks up in it and then shoot the shoot at the rock with high pressure hose to get any algae or any kind of film that's building up, any bird poop or whatever in there, like give it a good heavy spray to clean it off and fill it up. That is great. And these are smaller ones that are perfect for a ledge or a little, if you have a little wall in your garden or your yard. They do have bubbling rocks, which in theory would be nice, but if you don't stay on top of these and keep the water pristinely clean, usually they have a reservoir under here and it can get gross. Like there can be a lot of algae and things that are not healthy for the birds. I much prefer something like this where you could just come in and shoot it all with a hose and clean it out and put fresh water in, or when it rains, it catches fresh rainwater. And then if it sits for any while, I just, disperse that old water. But that's one of my favorite things to do. And I just bought a couple of rocks from a friend of mine that had natural depressions. My husband was like, oh, my friend Lonnie, he has a whole field of rocks that he's taken out of his cropland. We can go over and buy a couple from him. And I found a couple that had some natural depressions that are still sitting on my lawn. But those are my favorite. So water features are highly recommended by ornithologists for that, but keep it really, really shallow. And I think that is about it. There were some red flowers that I photographed. Let's see if I can find them. Red flowers are super hard. So this is one I was working on there. And this one was only 1/2500th of a second. So it was just lucky. I was just lucky. His eyeball is sort of in focus. But these red flowers are something else. This is a straight out of the camera. They weren't that red though in person. It was more the color style I had in camera. They were actually more orange red and not quite as saturated as they look here. They were actually more that kind of color because they were faded and old. But I love this one. Isn't this cute? His little head is all stuck in there and there's pollen all over his face. But that's the other thing that can be a problem is they tend to go into bushes and there's all this stuff around them. And when you have these bright flowers competing with them, you kind of have to go through your pictures and see if you can't find something that minimizes some of the chaos. Missed focus there. You can see all my flub ups here. Focus captured on that. And there's just little parts of him in focus. Really 1.8 is not the optimal thing. I should have had 5.6, but it was dusk. And I think my ISO was only at 250th of a second, 250 ISO. I could have done it better, but I was just so surprised that this little thing was letting me photograph it because they are a bit elusive. Sometimes if they're not acclimated to humans a lot, they will run away. This one was quite tame. That one's just completely out of focus. Anyway, so that is a few tips for hummingbirds, and grow these. These are called, I'm trying to think what it is. I'll be right back. I'm going to come right back. I'm going to pause this and find the plant. Kufia. I wanted to say hypertufa, which is cement pots. And I knew it had Kufia. These are some of the best flowers, and I think that's what it was. And then they're red, but they tend to fade out as time goes on. These have red to orange. But if you put in Kufia, that's a good one. And there are a lot of others. I mean, you can go to a place like Park Seed here. Also, Eden Brothers is a great one. Any pollinator mix is going to be awesome. So anything that's tall and vertical. So you can think like delphiniums, larkspur, Kufia, anything that has a tall, spiky sort of look is going to attract hummingbirds because they can sort of fly up and grab it. Salvias are really popular too. And let's see images. Even lupins. You see how this, like, isn't that awesome? I love that so much. Anything with a bell shape too. Also fuchsias, which is that right here. This is a fuchsia. They love fuchsias. But if you want to get these kind of stellar pictures, you want to have something that's vertical. This is a columbine, and they love those as well. If you want to get a picture like this, you're going to have a really fast, not super fast lens, but you're going to want to have something that's super far away from the bird itself. So if you have a bush, make sure that you don't have a building right here or a car. Put like 50 feet between the plant and whatever's behind it so you get maximum bokeh. A lot of times these people who shoot these kind of things are using like a 300 millimeter f2.8 or a 400 millimeter f2.8 or a 600 millimeter f4. Like they're using lenses in the tens of thousands because they can really separate their subject from the background and really hone in on where the bird is. But anything that's vertical, see here's another vertical plant. And then you just cross your fingers and hope your autofocus latches onto them at the right time. Anyway, I hope that helps. I'm excited to plan for next year, and I'm super jealous of any of you who get these little guys over the winter. So if you're like in Southern California or in the Southwest, and you're in the place where they overwinter, share all your pictures because I'll live vicariously through you until next year. All right, thanks. Bye-bye.